In case you haven't watched Popcross's announcement, go do it. What are you waiting for? Now that you've watched it, this is a big deal. Not just for Popcross, but for all internet artists. So, to celebrate, the rest of the funny art guys and myself planned this little collab to celebrate. Plus, if we phrase it as a congrats, we can ignore the morals of profiting off of someone else's success. Be quiet, I'm starting to not regret what happens to you in this episode. Anyway, on with the show. Oh, I see what's going on here. Just because Popcross Studios gets some fancy art commission, I get chased down by a bunch of my singing monsters Xenomorphs. Don't get me wrong, I'm proud of the guy. A YouTube artist making a name for himself in the professional art world is a big deal. But does that really mean I need to get hunted by some loud Xenomorphs? Couldn't N.E.R.D have turned them into SCPs, or have Van Helsing deal with them, or... Fine. Anyway, I woke up one morning to find myself in what looked like a futuristic holding facility. I tried to contact my AI lizard assistant Yoshi, but my signal was bad. Suddenly, a voice came over the intercom.
Welcome, Dino.
The voice said, sounding as if it were made out of random, out-of-context clips. Okay, this is weird. What's going on? I asked.
You may have noticed
Xenomorphs
has begun!
showing up.
In your world.
Oh really? I hadn't noticed, I said sarcastically.
I'm trying to kill you!
In a manner.
inconceivable!
You call it inconceivable, I call it skill. Or plot convenience, anyway. Also, was that a Princess Bride reference? You have good taste. It might save me from killing you. Also, why am I here?
You're all here for one purpose. To decide.
A worthy opponent.
Suddenly, as if on cue, I heard a sound. A rhythmic beat sounding like a xylophone was heard through the dark halls. Suddenly, a large pink xenomorph, with an exposed skull for a face, appeared before me. Inside of it was another xenomorph, this one blue and seemingly levitating, tapping its claws on the exposed rib of the bigger xenomorph. This looks familiar. Wait, I remember this from one of Popcross's videos. The Bon Appetit, yes, that's the one. Good pun, by the way. I almost feel bad about killing this thing. Maybe if I could play some music and calm it down, like in Popcross's videos. Suddenly the creature jumped at me, swinging its bladed tail. I dodged, then turned myself into a Tyrannosaurus. You know, one of those dinosaurs with the Wolverine claws. I grabbed the creature by the tail and began to swing it around in a circle, before bashing it into an interior wall. Eventually, the larger Xeno was out cold. I was starting to celebrate when the smaller blue Xeno jumped at me, leaping at my face. However, I then quickly swiped my tail, batting it into the wall. It too was out cold. Not even a minute after I defeated the first two Xenomorphs, I heard another noise, sounding like wind chimes clanking against one another. I turned and saw another Xenomorph, this one seemingly transparent. Its body was filled with green acidic liquid that splashed around its transparent glass-like body. A yellow human-like skull also floated inside of its head. It seemingly saw me and rushed towards me, snarling. I turned myself into a Dilophosaurus and dodged. It swiped at me with its tail, which was when I noticed something odd. Defying all laws of physics, the creature's body seemed to be made of completely isolated segments, held together by an invisible bond, which were all clinking into one another, making a sound like clinking glass. Fun fact, did you know that the reason people clink glasses while toasting was because, back in the Middle Ages, it was a way to make sure you weren't getting poisoned? When the glasses collided, a little bit of each liquid would splash into another person's glass, which obviously discouraged poisoning. There's also a similar reason to why people shake hands, and where am I going with this? Anyway, at this point I had an idea. I swept one of the creature's hind legs, knocking it onto the ground. I then picked up the corpse of the Xenomorph, which is what I'm calling the pink alien from earlier, and placed it in between two of the tail segments. The Xeno flask tried to move, but found it couldn't. I could have run away then, but I wanted to finish the job. I then grabbed the creature's head and pulled. As I pulled its head, I felt resistance, as if the invisible bonds were trying their hardest to pull the head back to its body. Then, like pulling back a rubber band, I let go. The head rocketed back towards its body, colliding with it and shattering, killing it. After killing the Xeno flask, I decided to wander around the ship. I found a window, but all I could see was the deep vacuum of space. I then managed to make my way to the ship's cockpit, where I was able to get some information. For example, the spaceship that I was on autopilot, and set to drive itself into the dark void of space. I entered the ship's computer, where I saw everything written in a strange alien language, a language that I recognized as Yautja. Now, in my world, Yautja don't exist. They are a fictional alien race in movies and comics, but the reason I was able to recognize the language was because I hate-watched Predator 2018 on a regular basis. This also explains why the recording sounded like a compilation of clips, as Yautja technology allows them to replicate language by mimicking what they've heard. But though I had some answers, I still had questions. Why was I being hunted down by a Yautja? How do I get off this ship? And what was that sound? I turned around to see a strange purple and pink xenomorph holding out its hands. Suddenly, two glowing mouths appeared floating over them, which began singing in a warbling tone. "Ah, finally," I said. "Someone with as big a brain as me. This might be a challenge." Suddenly, the creature threw one of its mouths at me, biting and gnashing its teeth. I turned into the Lavasaurus and batted the mouth away with my tail. The creature threw another mouth, which bit into my arm. I pulled it out and crushed it with my foot, but it took a large chunk from my arm. The Xenomind summoned another mouth, but I batted it away again, before punching one of the computer screens, breaking off a piece of glass. Holding the shard in my hand like a dagger, I rushed the creature, before stabbing it in the head, obviously killing it. At that point, I was feeling pretty good about my situation. Granted, I was trapped in a strange spaceship in the middle of nowhere, held captive by a walking movie clip dictionary, and forced to fight deadly aliens. But I was sort of comfortable in this environment. So far, anyway. However, something happened. Something that completely changed my opinion on the circumstances. Suddenly, I heard a strange noise, sounding like singing. Well, calling it singing may have been generous. It sounded like a melodic parrot, choking and throwing up simultaneously. Suddenly, a rather strange green xenomorph entered the room. When I say this thing was strange, I mean it. Unlike the other xenomorphs, it had feathers on top of its head. It also had a beak in place of its wrinkly lips. It also had no arms and had 3 legs. I wasn't even sure how this creature could move around, but it was able to do so. The creature once again slashed its bladed tail at me. Still in my Dilophosaurus form, I dodged. At this point, I had gotten pretty used to how fights with xenomorphs work. It slashes its tail, I dodge, I grab its tail, I stab it with its own tail, so long xenomorph. However, right as I grabbed this thing's tail, it began to scream. I let out a loud call, which caused me to cover my ears in pain. As I covered my ears, the creature's tail scratched my arm, cutting a deep laceration. You see, one thing I hadn't yet mentioned about myself is that I am autistic. This means my brain has a different way of working, and one of these different ways of working has to do with noise. I am extremely sensitive to it, so this screaming Big Bird knockoff was going to be an issue. "Hey, knock that off, you 3-legged dodo!" I yelled, only for the creature to respond, "Hey, knock that off, you 3-legged dodo!" The creature was seemingly mimicking my words. It then screamed again, and a pounding pain began to fill my head. At that point, I ran, needing to find a quieter killer alien to fight. Only that was my mistake. I suddenly found myself in a large, empty room. It was circular, with closed doors lining the halls. I looked around me and found that the degenerate emu had followed me, continuing its screeching melody. However, the situation became even worse. All around me, the doors lining the walls opened, and out of them came more colorful and strange xenomorphs. The largest door opened in front of me, and a large green xenomorph appeared before me. It was bipedal with 2 legs and no arms. It had a larger head crust than the other aliens around it, and its back was covered in ovomorphs, or for the more casual fans out there, xenomorph eggs. This was a xenomorph queen. To defend myself, I transformed into a T-Rex, making me about as large as the queen. However, instead of attacking me, the queen let out a deep bellow that almost sounded like, "Wake up the webmorphs, wake up the webmorphs." Suddenly, all the Xenomorphs around me began making musical noises. A cantankerous chorus soon arose, as the Xenomorphs sang, beat themselves to make percussion-like noises, played instruments that seemed to be part of their bodies, and overall played in horrific harmony. And then, it happened. I had a meltdown. Now, most people know what an autism meltdown is, or at least they think they do. They've seen it in movies or watched horrible videos online. However, you probably don't know what one feels like from a first-person perspective. So, I will share that with you. What, you thought this was going to be a fun video about my singing monsters Xenomorphs? Well, this is a video meant to congratulate Popcross Studios, someone who excels in emotional writing, so this is keeping on theme. Imagine, if you will, you're going about your day, when suddenly a deafening noise is heard. You try covering your ears, but it's far too loud and can't be dampened. The noise enters your brain, which quickly then feels like a hydraulic press is squeezing it from all sides. The pain is agonizing, so you try to escape, but you can't. At this point, in a desperate play for survival, your brain begins to shut down any part of itself it deems non-essential. Oftentimes, your ability to speak goes first, followed by motor functions, then your internal monologue. At this point, the pressure builds, and you find it hard to even stand. If you are in a crowded area, which, let's face it, you always are when this happens, people begin to crowd around you. Now, there are two options that can happen here, not that you get to choose: shutdown or meltdown. In a shutdown, your body will continue to shut itself down, keeping you conscious enough to experience what's happening, but not conscious enough to do anything about it. You're left there, paralyzed in fear, pain, and anger, as the crowd of people around you begin to react. At best they mock, and at worst they pity. But that is the preferable option. If you melt down, your subconscious fight-or-flight kicks in, trying to do all it can to get away from the pain. Beyond your control, your limbs will flail, trying to bat away all the bystanders whose mere presence is making the situation infinitely worse. You don't try and hurt them, you just want them to be gone. But they never get the message. Sometimes they pull out their phones, but if you're a bigger person like myself, sometimes they pull out their guns. Now imagine all this happening to a freaking T-Rex. I could not tell you what exactly happened next, it was all a blur, but when I regained full consciousness sometime later, I can't exactly tell you how long, time flies when your brain is shutting itself down for survival, I found myself back in human form. All around me were the bloodied and beaten corpses of Xenomorphs, with the queen lying dead in the center. My armor itself was highly damaged, and several parts of my body had suffered severe acid burns, though the pain felt numb at the moment. I slowly stood up as the voice that had greeted me earlier spoke again.
Congratulations. You are still alive.
You made me do something I haven't done in years, I said. For that, you will die.
You will have your chance.
I really prefer my prey.
And healthy before they're broken.
This man, alien, whatever, made me relive one of the worst moments of my life. I wanted revenge. However, before I got the chance, a blue light soon enveloped me, and I found myself back in my room. Well, that got depressing. Anyway, congrats Popcross, and this definitely isn't revenge, for fear isn't enough.